and welcome to the Momversation Club, the podcast born out of the idea that every mum needs a tribe. I'm Claire Strong.
And I'm Christina Struckmeyer. We're two moms just like you, navigating the chaotic, challenging, and often isolating world of motherhood.
It's said that it takes a village to raise a child, but we want to know, where the F is that village at?
It's a question that resonates with so many of us who find ourselves raising children, managing careers, and often trying to maintain our own identities with a sense of isolation.
But we're here to remind you that you're not alone. The Momversation Club is your village, a place where you feel appreciated, valued, and understood.
We believe that by sharing our own experiences, successes, and struggles, we can create a virtual village for all you amazing mamas out there.
So join us every week for an honest, raw, and relatable discussion about all aspects of being a mum, including the stuff you just can't talk about with anyone else.
So if you've ever asked yourself, where the F is the village? Well, you found your tribe. So let's get into it.
Hey, Christina.
Hey, Claire. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm going to be honest. I'm a little bit nervous about today's topic, but really excited to bring some value to hopefully a lot of our listeners. And but yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking. So I'm feeling okay. I got my coffee. We're okay.
Okay, so let me just explain a little bit about today's episode. So Christina and I are going to be talking about a subject that I'm sure many of you at home have experienced, and it's a subject of pregnancy loss. So if this is something that's just a little raw for you like right now, and you don't feel in a good space to listen to this conversation and be a part of it, that's totally fine. So we do want to just issue a bit of a trigger warning right now, just to give you a heads up that we are going to be speaking about a subject that's very raw for a lot of people. So with that said, Christina, I just think you are so brave because you have experienced this. You're going to explain obviously about your situation, but you wanted to tackle this topic, and this is something that's still very raw for you. So I'm going to let you explain.
Yeah, of course. Well, I've been sharing my life online openly for the last 5 to 8 years. And something I've always done is when I'm in the thick of something, I won't share it when I'm in the thick of it. Just to allow myself to process it correctly, to give space to my family, friends, all that stuff. But I do believe that once you're through the thick of it, I personally find a lot of comfort in sharing that experience. And what I found over the last few years is that when I do share hard experiences, there's a lot of relatability in that. And there's a lot of people on the other side that feel seen and heard and healed by some of the stuff I'm sharing. So that being said, today's topic came up because Claire and I have been doing this podcast for several months now. We love it so much. And about a month ago, I actually experienced a pregnancy loss, actually 2 pregnancy losses back to back. And while that was going on behind the scenes on the show, we were covering other topics, but it was something that I knew eventually when I was ready, I wanted to cover on here because it is such a common thing for women to go through. When I was, it's not my first experience in this space, but I've done some research since the first experience in having a miscarriage. And, it's 1 in 4 pregnancies that end in a loss, which means for our viewers, which is a large audience of mothers, there is a high likelihood that right now someone is listening who has either experienced a loss or has someone close to them.
Yeah. 1 in 4. I mean, that's such a high percentage. And obviously everybody's experience varies. For me, thankfully, I haven't personally experienced pregnancy loss, but I know so many people around me, including you, obviously, Christina, who have. And sometimes they've experienced several losses. It isn't just the one miscarriage. It's several miscarriages. And I mean, you mentioned just now that you've actually experienced 2 back to back. I mean, how are you feeling, Christina? How are you right now?
Big breath. It's like anything with grief. I shared on this podcast, I lost my father in 2021. And,
Mhm.
in the thick of that, it was like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, I don't know how I feel. Like, it's grief. It's like, it's a whole other beast. And what I've learned over the last 2 years of that is that it comes in waves. You have
Mm.
moments where everything's just fine. And then you have maybe a reminder or something said by someone, or there's something on TV or film, and you're pulled back into that space. So physically, I feel good. Mentally,
Mhm.
I'm doing better, but I still have those moments of grief, here and there, and it's something that I think that you kind of just carry with you. It's a part of your story once you've experienced one. And I will share a little bit about kind of what mine looked like, and share a
Mm.
little bit about some of that. But the main point of today's episode is I want people to feel like their experience is validated,
Yes.
and that
Yeah.
and for those who haven't had a miscarriage, or have not had anyone close to you, with 1 in 4 pregnancies ending up in that space, it's likely that you're going to encounter someone at some point. And I want to share some ways to help, some things that people did for me that really
Yep.
helped. And
Yep.
also maybe a short list of things not to say. So that way you are well received by that other person.
Well, that's great because, it's such a personal situation. And if it's not happening to you directly, I guess it is difficult to know necessarily what the right thing to say or do is, because the last thing you want to do as a friend or a relative is upset that person even further, but you also want them to know that you're there for them. Um,
Exactly.
so let's get back to, you know, so you've had two pregnancy losses really in close succession.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting because when you go to an OBGYN and you've had a previous
Hmm.
loss, they have a question of how many pregnancies have you had, and then how
Mm.
many children have you given birth to?
Yeah.
And the answer to that question for me now is I've had 5 pregnancies, and I've had 2 children that I've given birth to. So I've had 3 miscarriages in my life.
Mm.
My first miscarriage was in college. I unexpectedly, very surprisingly, fell pregnant with actually the father of my daughter, my oldest daughter. We were when I was in college. It was before her birth,
Hmm.
and I had something called a blighted ovum. So what
Mm.
that is it's a missed miscarriage where your embryo starts developing but stops at some point, so it never
Okay.
fully forms. And so, what I found that out was when I went for my first ultrasound. So, typically in the United States, like most women can't see their doctors until they're about 8 to 10 weeks.
Hmm.
You pee on your stick and you're like, I'm
Yeah.
pregnant.
Yeah,
And they're like,
that's pretty much
great.
in the UK. Yeah, yeah,
They're like, we'll
similar
see you in
drill.
2 months. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, when I went in for my first looky loo, I was with the doctor and they said, are you sure on your dates of like when, this could possibly have happened? And I was like,
Mhm,
yeah, I'm very sure.
mhm,
Um, and what I was looking at was just a gestational sac with no baby inside. And
mm,
so they diagnosed that as a blighted ovum. And I had
mhm,
to have a procedure called a DNC,
mhm.
where they have to remove that, everything that's in your uterus, in order to make sure you don't have infection or any of that stuff afterwards. So
Okay.
that happened in 2012 or something like that. And then I went
Mm,
on to have my daughter in 2015 after I got married.
mhm,
And I had Stella, and then there was a big hiatus because I didn't want any more children, I thought.
mhm.
And then with my husband, as I got remarried, we fell pregnant with our daughter Rennie, and had a pretty normal pregnancy. There was a lot of like pregnancy complications and irritations, but pretty much like smooth sailing as far as like baby's development and stuff. And
Okay.
so that's the story with that. And then, we decided probably about 5 months ago that we're like, you know what? Let's have another baby. let's let's add a child to this situation.
Why not?
Um, why not? And we
Yeah.
we are a farmer family, so we plan
Yes.
our babies around harvest and planting seasons.
Now, this is so funny. I only realized this a few weeks ago when you and I were talking about this upcoming episode, and you mentioned this. I was like, "What? Say that
Yeah.
again." So you have
Yes.
like a small window, basically, of opportunity. That's
Yeah,
so
yeah, we have,
funny.
like, a really small window because we don't wanna have a baby when dad's gonna be on the tractor 24/7 because that's
Oh
not helpful for
gosh.
me,
Yeah.
and he also won't get the time with the baby, and so anyways, we plan things around not hitting, like, a really, high need season.
Mhm.
So we got pregnant in the beginning of September,
Mhm.
and that pregnancy, I knew about it on a Monday, and we lost the baby on a Thursday.
Okay.
So it was a very short-lived pregnancy. In fact, if I wasn't tracking my cycle, I'm betting I would have just thought it was a period, which
Yes.
is a
Yes.
really common thing.
I was
I
about to
think
say that. I said at the beginning of the show, I've been lucky enough not to have a miscarriage. However, I'm not very good at tracking my period. So honestly, I can't say that for sure because like you said, unless you're really on top of your cycle and you're tracking it, I'm sure a lot of women have miscarried without even their knowledge.
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
thing about the statistics with this is that,
Mhm.
80% of the reported, pregnancies in the first trimester of
Mhm.
pregnancy. Um, so there's a there's probably a larger percentage because it is so common in that first few weeks that that might happen.
Yeah.
And less common, but still there after about,
Mhm.
12 to 15 weeks.
Mhm.
So anyways, that happened. It was kind of like, oh my gosh, so exciting. Okay, we're not that's not happening. And so it
That's
was
rough.
sad. It
Yeah.
was sad, but also we hadn't had that time to really sit with it, we hadn't really
Mhm.
spent time going, "Oh, wow, let's dream about this. Let's think about this." It was
So it
almost like so much of a roller coaster.
So it sounds like because it was so quick, so you found out on the Monday by what did you say, the Thursday? You'd
Yeah,
realize, yeah. So a crazy roller coaster of emotions, I'm
yeah,
guessing, but not so much time to dwell on the future and the baby and all of that. So
yeah.
that was that
It
miscarriage.
was
And
sad, but also and it also happened at the happiest place on earth. So I actually
oh,
we left for our Disneyland trip, and then
yeah.
I miscarried at Disneyland.
Oh
And
my
so,
God.
it was thankfully not, some miscarriages can be very, very heavy bleeding and things like that. It was very
Mhm.
light, and so, I was able to continue the day, but also in the back of my mind, I thought, "That's quite a bit of blood." Like, I'm wondering if I need to get to my doctor when I get back, and, it's not enough to go to an ER, but, like, any blood that you see in the first trimester does worry you, especially if you've had a loss before.
Yeah, of course it does. And I mean, just talk to me about that. So you were at Disneyland, you're there with your husband and your eldest daughter, and well,
Mhm.
both of your daughters. You'd got
Yeah,
got
the baby too.
little baby there too.
Yeah.
So, you're trying to have a, great time for the girls and you find out about that. How did you get on with that holiday? How did you get on with that day?
Well, with Stella, I had
Mhm.
a lot of bleeding around 9 weeks,
Okay.
and I remember freaking out because it was, again, my second baby after miscarriage, and
Yeah,
I
sure.
think there's a level of anxiety after you've had a loss during a
Mhm.
pregnancy that's higher. So but I remember freaking out and then going into the OBGYN and my doctor being like, "Everything's great. There's your healthy baby
Mhm.
right there. Like, everything's fine."
Mhm.
And I was like, "What the hell was with that bleeding?" It was just like,
Yeah.
it happens. Like, it happens sometimes. It's a perfectly normal thing to have some blood in early pregnancy. So I think for me, when I was at Disneyland, I had some cramping, but it wasn't excessive. I had
Mm.
some bleeding, but it wasn't excessive. So I kind of like went, okay, well, maybe this isn't what you think it is. Like, maybe you're just having some light spotting because it's a perfectly normal, pregnancy symptom.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I got back and I went and made an appointment with my doctor just to make sure everything was okay,
Mhm.
that we had a confirmation that, that's exactly what happened. So I think for me, the way I navigated that was that I kind of just told myself that isn't what it is. Like, that's not happening.
So you almost didn't believe it for the sake of why do you think you were doing that? Was it just to preserve your mental state so you could carry on with the holiday and maybe I'll deal with that when I get back? I mean, why do you think with hindsight now, why do you think you did that?
Well, I think that there wasn't much I could do. right? Like,
Mm,
I couldn't
yeah,
have gone to a doctor, I couldn't
yeah,
have, like I guess if I flew back, like, we could've, but I didn't wanna ruin the trip,
yeah.
and I also didn't feel like it was, dangerous for me to not address it at the moment, so
Mhm,
I think it was easier. It was easier to just act like it wasn't happening and then get home and hope that I was right. Like hope that that's, it was just normal part of pregnancy and it turns out it wasn't. And so that happened and it hit my husband a lot harder than it hit me because I've had
mm,
a loss before and it was a much more
mhm,
in my opinion devastating loss to my own mental health
mhm.
because it had been the first time for me back then, and it was, like, that mixture of disbelief and sadness and, like, doubt and anger and all those emotions
Yeah,
came up the first
yeah,
time.
yeah.
So this time was like, I had already done that, but for him, this was his first loss, and
Mm.
so he had a harder time with it, and,
So did
he
you find yourself almost, counseling him, if you like? Did you find yourself in that role?
Yeah, I was definitely, like, more sad for
Mm,
him and, like, not
mm,
really, mentally addressing it for myself at all.
mm.
In fact, I was, like, really game to just go again. Like, I was like, "Alright,
Really?
like, that
Wow.
happened. When we're cleared, I wanna try again. Like, I wanna just keep going and just try again." It was probably just a fluke, like, let's just
Mhm,
move forward,
mhm.
and to our surprise and excitement, we got pregnant immediately after.
Oh,
Um
wow.
yeah, we got pregnant right after, and I
Mhm,
talked to my doctor. I was like, "Is there any concern in getting pregnant right after?" And they're like, "No." A lot of people have miscarriages and then they go on to have very healthy pregnancies right after, and it's very
mhm,
common that that happens. And
mhm.
so we didn't have any reservations. We just jumped into it. And with that pregnancy, my body was like, "You are pregnant." It was giving
Wow.
me
Were you really
all the
having all the
symptoms.
symptoms? Yeah? Oh
Yeah, I
god.
was so sick, like, food
Oh,
aversions to the
no.
max, throwing up all over the place. Sorry to our neighbors, I threw up in the back of their, like, gate in their in their,
Wow.
like, pasture once.
Oh, you're kidding. Did you
No,
were you able to hose it down, or did you just leave it to nature?
I left it to nature. I'm sorry to that person.
Oh god. That's so funny.
So
Oh
I
my
was
god.
really, really sick, and because, again, this is my 5th pregnancy at that time,
Yeah.
my body immediately was like, "You are going to show physically." And I
Wow.
remember talking to you on podcast and, like,
Yeah.
wearing loose clothing in case the camera went down a little bit because
Yeah,
I
we were
already
trying
had
to
a
keep
bump.
it well, we were trying to keep it a secret because you weren't at the stage where you wanted to announce,
Yeah.
but yeah, you were showing. Yeah, and
Yeah.
everything looked like it was on track, didn't it?
Yeah, well, I was so, so sick all the time,
Mhm.
so tired, like, all of the symptoms, and so it gave me a lot of assurance of, like, "Okay, things are going well, like, my HCG hormones must be doing really well, I feel good." I
Yeah.
mean, I don't feel good, but I
Oh, you don't
feel
feel good, but you
mentally
feel
good.
pregnant. You feel pregnant.
I
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
pregnant, yeah, and so, I kind of dismissed any concerns I might have had
mhm.
because, I felt so pregnant, and my body was showing me that I was pregnant already, and, so Alex and I kind of went right into, like, dream mode. We started talking about, like, well, we're gonna have 3 kids in the car and, like, 2 car seats and a booster, and, like, which car are we gonna drive? And, like, what are we gonna do about their room situation, when the baby's
Yeah,
here? And we started
all the
kind of
practical things. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, we were talking and having those discussions and kind of making decisions based on those discussions, and we just kind of started going that route because I was feeling so sick. It was like confirmation that everything was okay. And then I went in for my first ultrasound, and I could tell probably within the first minute that something was wrong.
Why?
The doctor so there's kind of this thing that doctors do, and I don't know if they willingly do it or if it's just like
Mm,
they have bad poker faces, but it's all over their face. Like when something's wrong on a scan, I can tell. Maybe I'm just perceptive, maybe they're bad at lying, but like
mhm.
I can tell immediately, like if something's not right. And so he was scanning my belly, and I was supposed to have been about 10 and a half weeks, like 10 weeks or so. So just shy of like when you would announce,
Yeah,
because you
like
typically
around
don't
the
announce
12-week mark, don't you? Yeah,
totally.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and they were really inundated, so I didn't get to go around the 8-week mark, which I did with Rennie. I had to wait till 10.5 weeks, and so
Mhm.
we were in there and, he's scanning my belly, like, on the ultrasound with the regular, not the wand, but the
Oh,
belly one,
okay, yeah.
and he goes, I'm not picking the anything up. I think that you might be a little earlier than you think you are. I'm gonna get the wand." And he grabs the wand and we switch over to that piece, which, by
Mhm.
the way, is so phallic looking. Like, let's just take a beat.
Oh god, who do you think designed that? Do you think it was a guy?
It's
Maybe? I don't know, we can Google
I
it, but
don't
I'm
I don't know, but
guessing.
I remember when Alex first saw that in our first pregnancy and they put this giant condom on it and, like,
Oh
he was
my
like,
god.
"Oh my god, what is
That's
that?"
funny.
I was like,
That's
"That goes
funny.
inside of me."
At that at that point, you've had enough of that. We're good. We don't wanna see another one of those for a while.
He likes to embarrass me with jokes, and so sometimes, like, when the doctor did that, he'd be like, "She can take it." Like, "Ah,"
Oh,
like,
oh my god. Yeah, my husband would have done exactly the same, but then again, our husbands are related, so maybe this,
"Oh
like,
my
sense of
god."
humor runs in their family.
Totally, totally. So anyways, we got a little deviated, but,
Yeah.
we used the wand and, as he was going through, first off, I saw what could look like 2 different sacs. So I was like, "Am I having
Oh,
twins?" Like, holy shit.
shit, yeah. Oh my god. So
So
at
I'm, like,
first,
looking
that's what
at that,
you
like, my eyes are being big. I'm, like, trying to, like, big because it's so grainy, the ultrasounds, and I was
yeah.
freaking out. I was like, "Is he about to say is that why he's being quiet? Is he gonna tell me twins?"
Did
But
you actually ask it? Did you actually ask that? Did you say, "Oh,"
no.
you
I
didn't?
was like,
Okay.
"I'm just gonna pretend like this isn't happening. I'm gonna
Okay.
just" and
Okay.
so but I was watching him, and he started kind of moving around a lot more and
Right.
being very quiet, and typically when a doctor scans you and they see the embryo and everything's healthy, they'll
Mm.
go, "Oh, look, it's your baby. There's the little heartbeat." Like, they'll immediately reassure you.
Mhm.
And he was not doing that. He was scanning around, he was moving around. I can see with my eyes that there is an embryo in there. I can see that it's not just a sac, there is an embryo.
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Why aren't we talking about this? And also, is that another one? Like, what the fuck?"
Oh, I can
And
only
so
imagine. My god.
he he's like, I'm just moving because he can tell that I'm like, "Where are you at with your mind right now?" He's
Yeah.
like, "I'm just looking around, like, I'm not detecting a heartbeat just yet. You might be a little earlier than you think." Like, and he's looking around and I'm like, "Is there 2 sacs in there?" And he's just like, it could be. It's really early." He's like, "It's very, very early." And he kept saying that. And he's like, "I'm gonna print these pictures out and go in the other room and kind of take a look at this and, like, decipher exactly, where we're at with dating." He's like, "And then, why don't you just go ahead and get dressed and, like, we'll go from there." And so that's not the typical ending of a regular ultrasound
Oh,
appointment.
so
Um,
how long were you left then while the doctor was doing that?
Thankfully, just a few minutes. And so he came
Yeah.
back and he was just like, "Hey, you're the child," like, he was
Mhm.
using the term baby, but I
Yeah.
hesitate to use baby at that space. But anyways,
Mhm.
the baby was, measuring at, like, 6 5.5, 6 weeks. And he's like, "And sometimes that's a little early to see, like, a heartbeat." And he's like, "So why don't we do this?" He's like, "Why don't we have you come back in a couple weeks?" And I went, "Doctor, like, there's just no way that that's correct. Like, the dates had to have been wrong because I had a loss right before this, and there was an
Mhm.
ultrasound on this day to confirm the loss. And so the pregnancy had to have started on this day or, like,
Mhm.
this week.
Mhm.
And so it's very clear." And he's like, "Well, in that case, like, we might prepare ourselves for, what might be happening." And he kind of shared that, the loss might be happening, but he's not ready to confirm that yet because, it could be that I'm just a lot earlier and I'm wrong. And so, we went home and we were like, "What the hell? Like, do we prepare for loss? Do we look at our dates again?" So we had like a week of limbo after that,
Yeah,
which
I mean,
sucked.
we spoke during that time, didn't we? And I think, I mean, you'll explain this a little more, obviously, but the impression I got is that exactly that. You were in limbo. You didn't know whether to, just remain hopeful. I know you said Alex, that was his coping
He was
plan.
very hopeful.
He
Yeah.
was trying to be, half glass half full and optimistic, and there's still a good chance that this is a healthy pregnancy. And you, and maybe because of your experiences, you have been a little more pragmatic, I guess,
Yeah.
and kind of bracing yourselves for if this isn't going to be a pregnancy that goes to full term. And so, what
Yeah.
was that week like?
It was really hard because I didn't wanna give up hope because I thought, well, maybe there's a slight possible chance that, like, this could have been who knows? Like, your hormones could be weird after miscarriage. Maybe my
Mm,
ovulation was weird. Like, I tried to remain hopeful. I also took a lot of pregnancy tests during that week, which is not advised. But I kept seeing positive tests on my, sticks, and I was like, "Well, that's a
mm.
good sign. Like, that's a good sign that they're positive tests." So I, in the back of my mind, went, this is probably a miscarriage, but let's have a little bit of hope. Like, let's allow ourselves to feel happy for one more week. And Alex was having a hard time with that. And he talked a lot to his mom and his sister. And like, those are kind of his support people and talked a lot about it together. But it was rough. It was a rough week. I would say that was a harder week than the actual loss itself. So anyways, it's thinking about it's very emotional because I just feel for him. I was experiencing it myself, but like watching him go through grief is like really hard. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Christina. And you're so strong because, in addition to dealing with your own grief, you're trying to be there for Alex, and then you're a mum to two kids. You've
Yeah.
got you've got an 8-year-old and a toddler. And so, what was that like? Because we don't have the luxury in these situations to
Yeah, that's
just,
such a good point.
take a few weeks off to get ourselves where we need to be. So, how did you cope?
Yeah, it was really hard because the first miscarriage I had ever, I was in college. So when that happened, I mean, I drank a lot and I smoked a lot of weed and I just watched a lot of television and ate fried chicken and like I was just sad. I was in my little sad bubble and I pushed everyone away and kind of just did my own thing. Did not have that option this time. I had to
Mm,
still pick up and drop off my kid.
mm,
I visibly looked pregnant. And I was seeing people and, you know, it's like people are like, "Is there anything new with you? How you been?" Like
oh my
you can tell I
God.
look pregnant. And so I'm like walking around with this pregnant looking body, like doing all the things I need to do. And it was really, really difficult to navigate it. And I also couldn't share what was going on with my daughter just yet because I didn't know and she kept touching my belly because we had shared with her that we were pregnant and that was really difficult because I wasn't sure what was going to happen with it. So that was really rough. I had a lot of help. My mother-in-law is very close to me. I mentioned to her many times, but she did a lot of help with the pickups and drop-offs and it was just really hard. But after that week, we did go back in and we did confirm that it was a loss. And we scheduled, thankfully, very quickly, the procedure for a DNC because it looked like it wasn't going to naturally go through. And so we did that, and thankfully we were able to get in like 2 days later. And so it wasn't this long period like it could have been. And then I
Mm.
told I told you about my husband. My poor husband has really bad reactions to stress.
Like
He's
physical reactions, doesn't
yeah,
he? Yeah,
physical
yeah.
reactions. So when he heard that news about the confirmation of the miscarriage, he passed out
This
and
was
he did
this was while you were
while I was
there
at the
with the
doctor's
doctor.
office.
Yeah, oh my god.
Yeah, yeah. So I was sitting next to him and he just hit the floor. And the doctor was checking his pulse and he was like, "We don't have a pulse code." And he was like yelling out the door. And
Oh my
so I'd just
god.
been receiving this news of like your worst confirmation that you can get. And then my husband's having a medical emergency. He ended up being okay. We went to the ER and they were like, "You don't do well with stress." You have a
You
fancy
can say
term
that
for that.
again.
You freak
Oh my
out when you're stressed. I was like, "Oh my god." But thankful he's okay. Like my first thought was just like, "Oh my god, not even processing what just happened, but more so like is he okay?" And so in any case, he was all right. Everything went through. I didn't really process what happened until really after the DNC after the procedure.
Mhm.
And then, I was able to kind of navigate my emotions with it, which were really difficult, like all the normal, guilt, anger, thinking of, "Is there anything I could have done to cause this?"
Mm.
Frustration that it happened back to back, worried that, like, maybe if we tried again, that this would happen again, because I am 35 and this is my 3rd miscarriage, and the likelihood goes up. And then I had, like, the physical parts of the miscarriage. I was after the DNC bleeding, so I had to wear really large diaper-like pads, like, almost like postpartum care,
Wow.
um, and that was for, like, 2 weeks, and I had cramps and back pains and weakness and fatigue, and again, I'm a mom, so, like, I've got kids that wanna cuddle. I have, Stella looking at me sleeping so much and being like, "Is mommy sick?" Like, there's just all these things that were going on, and, it was rough. It was, like, a rough time, and thankfully, we had a lot of people that, like, showed up for us, and I wanna speak to that today. Like, just
Yeah,
a
let's
lot of
let's
people.
yeah, so tell us what worked for you and what didn't. What was helpful and what wasn't
Yeah.
helpful during that time?
Well, I think the most important thing that you can do for someone who's experienced a miscarriage is just to let them know that you're there for them and acknowledging their experience. So a lot of people don't know what to say, and sometimes it's okay to not say anything as far as like outside of I'm really sorry and I'm thinking of you. Like that's enough. Like that is enough to say to someone they feel like you're acknowledging their experiences. They probably aren't going to ask for help. It's another one I got a lot of like let me know if there's anything I can do. I don't know. Like I'm in my own world of like my own bubble of sadness. I don't know what you can do for me. But the people that stood out the most were the people that didn't really wait for me to ask for help and instead just were really thoughtful. And that looked like there was a lot of people that dropped off meals for my family. I had someone drop off some soup and some homemade sourdough bread, which by the way was amazing. The people that are making sourdough breads right
I was
now, like
gonna say,
y'all,
my gosh, that sounds great. That's
it
yeah,
was
homemade sourdough.
delicious, and I
Yeah.
was like, "I need this recipe, like, it's so good."
Oh.
My mother-in-law brought dinner a couple times, she took on pickups and drop-offs for the girl for
Mhm.
Stella,
Yeah.
and helping us get to her to different activities because I was in no shape to take her to certain things. My, best friend who lives in Texas sent over this thing called Spoonful of Comfort. I'll have to link a link to their business. They're
Oh,
not
yeah.
sponsored.
Okay, but what's that? What was that?
It's a meal delivery service with delivers soup and, like,
Oh.
goods to people as, like, comfort items. So they
Oh, I
have
love
ones for,
it.
like, people that had new babies, people that are sick, people that are going through grief, and there's, like, tea packages, there's, like, soup packages. It was really nice.
Oh, so it
Yeah.
sounds like the practical help was more important to you at that moment. So people offering their
Yeah,
practical help, so either helping with the kids, helping with meals, just taking some of the load off you. Is that right?
totally.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah, and there was some people that I didn't expect to do something sweet. I had a friend, we're good friends, but we've never really gone through massive hardship together.
mhm.
But we've hung out like many times, and she sent like a spa package thing where it was like bubble bath and like bath bombs and socks that were fluffy, and that was really kind. And then a mom at the school that I'm friends with, she sent home cookies with my mother-in-law and
Oh,
also a book, and she texted me and said that that book got her through a lot of hard times with her grief.
I
So
love
that
that.
was very, very thoughtful and sweet, and, there was just a lot of people, like, checking in on us. At first, we were kinda quiet with it, but then we did end up sharing on social media, and that sharing happened several days after the procedure, and we got a lot of messages and texts and calls and people that were just wonderful. So it was really nice. Like that, I think that those practical gifts and then just checking in on us. And there was a couple friends that would not just initially check in, but like even like a week ago have been like, "Hey, how are you feeling? Like how are things?"
I love that. I'm so glad you had that support network around you. Christina, can I just ask about Stella? Like, how's Stella doing? And how did you talk to her about this? Because she obviously saw your belly. She thought there was going to
Mhm.
be another baby around. How did that conversation look like? And how has she processed all of this?
It's really hard. It's really hard to explain something like that to a child, let
Mm,
alone an autistic child. Um, the way I explained it is after the DNC happened, I let her know that, mommy's baby is not in her belly anymore. And that sometimes that happens. Like sometimes something happens to the baby, or, pregnancies won't continue and, the baby will not be coming. With Stella specifically, and I wouldn't advise this verbiage for all children, you have to be very
mhm,
concrete. Like when my dad died, it was really hard because I wanted to say all these things like he's still with us in our heart and like, he'll be looking up from above and like all these things, but that's not, she can't latch on to that. So the advice I got to handle grief the first time with my father was to be very pragmatic.
mm,
Grandpa is has died, and he was very very sick. And sometimes when people are sick, they don't get better, and most of the times they do. But sometimes when they're very very sick, no one can help.
mhm.
And he will not be at grandma's house because he's not going to be there anymore because he's dead. Like that was, and it's so awful to hear out loud. Like it's
Yeah,
rough, right? But like
yeah, it's
that's
very raw.
she needs to hear that because,
Mhm,
she won't understand otherwise, like, why he's not there, why he's not at every event, and then you'll have that discussion over and over.
mhm.
So it was similar with this. It was like, sometimes when people are pregnant, there's something that happens to the baby, and then there's no baby, and that's what happened. Mommy's baby is not in her belly anymore, and we aren't gonna have a little brother or sister. We might have another baby in our belly, and I'll let you know if there is one.
And
And
has she spoken much about it since that conversation?
not really, but she has come up to me and kissed my belly, like, many
Ah,
times. So I think
okay.
she understands in her own way, and she has a hard time dealing with sadness, and I have a hard time dealing with sadness too. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't do well. It was very obvious, to be honest, and this kinda gets me to my next point of things to do and not do when you're speaking to someone, but, something I realized about me and my family is that when someone's going through a hardship, we'll reach out once and say, "Hey, I'm really sorry that happened, and I love you and I'm here for you," and then we don't check in. Like, we
Mm,
have this thing where we often will act like it's not happening. And I don't know if it's intentional or just something that our moms did and then our moms did and, like, grandma did, and, like, it's just a learned thing, but it was
mhm.
very obvious because Alex's family's not like that. They're very much like, almost smothery. Like, they
And you've
will
got
love
2
you to
extremes,
death.
really. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
So,
so,
okay, so which
it was
which
interesting.
works? Yeah, I mean, you've got 2 extremes there, so which did you prefer? One or the other, or somewhere in the middle?
It's interesting, but I thought I would prefer to not talk about it because that's how I handled the first one.
Mm,
Um, but I actually really, really, was comforted by being able to talk about it and being able to have people there. And even if my first reaction to sadness is always anger. It's just something I do. Like, I will shut people out and be angry first before I admit sadness. Um, and even though, like, I might not acknowledge that I'm happy about something happening, like, I later on am like, "I'm really glad that that happened." Um, and then I also had a really good friend, my best friend, reach out to me and just cry with me, which
mm.
I thought would be overwhelming, like, to have a lot of emotion coming at me, and, like, I didn't wanna cry, but, like, because I didn't wanna cry, I think it gave me permission to cry.
Oh,
'Cause
that's
hearing
so
her be sad
beautiful.
made me sad, and, like, it made me acknowledge that I am sad.
Oh, gosh,
So,
that's such a lovely moment, but was there
yeah.
something that someone said to you that was really unhelpful? That really either upset you or offended you or just,
Yeah.
frankly, pissed you off?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that, and I think, again, like, before I kind of go into that, I think everyone who reaches out means well. Like,
Mm,
everybody who has reached out to me over the last 3 losses meant well. They wouldn't reach out to be unhelpful or mean or, cold. They're
Sure.
trying to help. But there were several things that were said to me over the last 3 pregnancies that were unhelpful. One of the things is the word "at least." If you start a
Mhm.
sentence with "at least," just stop. Like, just stop, don't say it. At least it happened early in your pregnancy. At least you have other children. At least you know you can get pregnant. Like, those types of things are really unhelpful and hurtful, like unintentionally hurtful. Because for me, at least it happened early in your pregnancy doesn't acknowledge the loss. It makes it like so it doesn't count. Like, what is that about?
Mm.
It's still a loss to me. Like, to me, it is grief that I am processing with my family. So I think that they mean to help me through, but it does the opposite.
So they're
Um,
trying they're almost trying to encourage you to see the positives. But
yeah,
at that time, I mean, and even after the event, that comes across to you, the person that it's happening to, as they're diminishing what happened. They're diminishing your,
yeah,
your sadness, your disappointment, all of those very raw emotions.
yes,
So,
yeah, and then
okay.
things like another kind of realm is it wasn't meant to be, or it was in God's plan, or those types of like whatever you believe in, like that spiritual piece of like this wasn't supposed to happen and that's why. Another one that was really unhelpful was maybe there was something wrong with the baby. And that's why you had a miscarriage so that that wouldn't be a pregnancy with major disabilities, which as a mother with a child with a disability was like, are you fucking serious? Like,
Kind of
just like,
offensive. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
god, it was crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, dismissive statements in general, and then commiserating. Another one is it's a fine line, right? Because commiserating with your own loss can be very helpful, like in the phrase of like maybe I've been there before and I
Mhm.
know how much that hurts and I'm here for you. That is a very helpful statement.
Mhm.
What is not helpful is saying my friend Susan had a baby, and she lost it at 6 months, which is so much worse, and here's all of the details about my friend Susan. um so not helpful, and also so sad for Susan. Like, why are we even mentioning this right now? um I had a person do that where it was like she was discussing her own losses, and again, I know her heart, so I did not lash out or anything, but it's like that's not helpful. But the way to do that is to say, I've gone through a loss, or I've gone through several losses, and I know how much that hurts your heart, and I'm so sorry. That feels so different than going into why your loss was so much worse.
That's really useful information, because in that situation, if it's not happening to you, and even if it has happened to you in the past, just to have that awareness that what you're going to say, how is that going to be perceived to the person that you're talking to? And yes, your heart may be in the right place, but as you said, I can just only imagine that, if you've gone through that, the last thing you need to hear is, well, at least this. And I'm sure it happened
Exactly.
for a reason. It's that's not what you want to hear. It's not helpful, is it?
No, no. And if you don't know what to say, that's okay. Like, there's many times in my life where something's happened and I didn't know what to say, and I'm so sorry suffices almost every time. I'm so sorry. I'm thinking of you and your family. I'd love to bring you a meal, or insert practical thing here if you want to go that extra level. But even and I'm so sorry, I'm thinking of you is just fine. Like, that is great. And I remember very well who showed up in those spaces. And I will always remember that. And not in a
Mhm.
vindictive way where I'm like, I'll remember. But it's like, if something happens to that person, I'm going to go out of my way to make sure that I am there for them the same way they were there for me.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Christina, I didn't know what the best way was to approach the situation. I
Yeah,
didn't know, I didn't want to upset you any further, but I wanted you to know that I was there for you. So, what you've just been discussing is actually really useful for me to remember and to carry forward if ever any of my friends are in a similar situation. So
Yeah.
yeah, so thank you for sharing this. You're very
Yeah.
brave.
Thank
Um,
you, Claire.
can I ask you though, Christina? So has this? I mean, how are you feeling about potentially getting pregnant again? Is that something that are you wanting to do that? Are you giving yourself some time out? I mean, where are you at with all of that?
Well, in my heart of hearts, I know our family, I see 3 kids. Like, I
Really?
see 3 kids. Yeah, and I think for every woman planning their family out or, like, thinking about, "Do I add another child?" You kinda go to that, like, "Who do I wanna see at my dinner table for holidays?" Or,
Oh.
"What do I want?" Like, "How many weddings do I wanna attend?" Like, you start going into, like, the adulthood. And
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me, the reason why it was so important that we had, another child originally is that I wanted Stella to have a sibling, and I wanted to experience that with Alex. I wanted to experience having a child with him, like a bio
Mhm,
child.
mhm,
But we want a sibling because one, I really want Rennie to have another child to bond with. And I want her to feel less alone with, us aging and Stella being older and we don't know what's going to happen with her disability. I don't want her to tackle that alone. And so I
mm,
want her to have a sibling because I have siblings and Alex has siblings, and it feels good to have another person be like, "Isn't this wild? Like, do you
mm.
see what I'm seeing?" And have that very intimate look and, like, be immersed in the same way. So yeah, I think we definitely want to have another child. Whether that actually is able to happen is up for debate. We do plan around harvest seasons, so we're not gonna have a child now because that would be right in the thick of harvest. And we
How
don't want to have.
rude.
Yeah, I know, I know. So stay tuned. Like, I probably won't share until I'm definitely out of the weeds with
Yeah.
the possibility of a miscarriage. But yeah, I think that we will try for another one eventually. And I'm just really, I don't
Can
want to get like political, but like we talked a little bit about why I'm just really thankful that we were able to have like a safe exit out of those situations because in
Yes.
in many circumstances, again, not to get super political, but we are a podcast about motherhood and we are talking about these things. There are a lot of states right now that um, something like a DNC could be up for
Mm.
debate.
So I wanted to bring this up because we have
Yeah,
spoken about this, and in all your lost pregnancies, you had a DNC. If
yeah.
that hadn't have been available to you, how much more traumatic do you think this whole experience would have been, Christina?
So much more traumatic. Yeah, to have I think it's important to note that there are many choices when things like this go down, and I'm so
Mm,
thankful to have those choices. My doctor did not say DNC is the only way. There was a medication I could have taken to have a miscarriage at home. There was the wait and see. We can see if your body naturally will eject the miscarriage. But there was, he did mention if you do end up waiting for a naturally miscarriage to happen, there is the case that you might develop an infection. There might be some things to kind of think about with that. And if you wanted to go that route, we can talk about that more. Um, I think every woman should have the ability to make that choice for themselves because I know there are a lot of women who would not agree with a DNC, who would want to wait till the natural miscarriage happened. And that is valid.
mhm,
And then there's like people like myself where the thought of continuing that pregnancy with a with a baby that's not alive in my body for extended amounts of time, who knows how long, would be really hard. And the physical aspect of that also would be very hard because like, what am I going to miscarriage when I'm at mommy and me gymnastics?
mhm.
Like, I don't want to have that happen. And so it's important to I want to put that out there that there is no wrong or right answer. You get to choose what is best for you and your family. But God, am I so thankful that I have that choice because I'm in California and that there isn't this debate of is this life threatening to mom? And do we have to have this procedure? Because it's available in many states still that have kind of more restrictions, but there's the task of proving that it's not safe for mom to continue to have this, weight? Um, and is it life threatening enough to justify a procedure like that? And that being up for debate by the physicians themselves who are worried about legalities is very unsafe, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in every situation, it has to be the mom's decision. And as you said, there are many different options, and you need to
Yeah.
go for the one that is best for you. But to not have those choices available to you and to be potentially liable criminally just doesn't seem right or fair.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm also thankful for having insurance. Like, I'm very privileged. Like, I'm a very privileged person to be able to afford to have health insurance, to be able to have an OBGYN, to be having the ability to have these discussions of having a DNC. When I had my first miscarriage when I was in college, I didn't have insurance. I was a
mhm.
college kid, and I had something, I forget what it's called, but it's basically like temporary Medi-Cal
Yeah.
for women who are pregnant. And I had that to see a doctor because I couldn't afford it. Um, and there was an expiration date because once you are no longer pregnant on paper, they will pull that insurance. And so when I went in for my confirmation appointment by myself to determine that I had had a miscarriage that first time, the doctor said, if you wait and not do a DNC today, you're not going to have it covered. And
Gosh.
you're going to have to pay out of pocket for that or go to like a Planned Parenthood or figure that out on your own. Or today, right now in this office, I can give you an ibuprofen and we can go in the other room and do it. And
Mm.
I did the first DNC procedure completely awake and with just a ibuprofen for pain. And it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, more than childbirth. It was so difficult. And I've talked to other women about that experience, other women who've had miscarriages, and that is not something that anyone has dealt with. They are almost always underneath general anesthesia and asleep and have pain meds. And I mean, hell, I was given like massive pain meds after the miscarriage. I was very high for like 2 days.
I can
It was like
imagine.
I was like, this is good. This is some good stuff
That's
in the
funny.
evenings. But maybe had some weird dreams, but
I
there were
bet.
some massive pain meds. First time around, nothing. I wasn't even given any follow-up. Like I was just ejected out because I didn't have insurance and I didn't have a regular OB.
So the experiences can vary wildly, can't they? Depending on which state you live in, depending on whether or not you have insurance, which is crazy sounding to me because I'm not originally from here. Obviously, I'm from
Yeah.
England, and we have the National Health Service, which yes, it's not perfect, but no woman would ever be in this situation in the UK.
Yeah.
So it still boggles my mind. Do you mind if I ask you, because I haven't experienced this, and I don't know what's involved with the DNC. Could you?
Yeah.
I don't know whether, without going into like crazy detail, what is that? Because there may be some of our listeners that are like, okay, what's that DNC they keep
Yeah,
talking
I'm
about?
gonna butcher like the pronunciation, but DNC is dilate and I think it's cutledge. But
Okay.
basically, they dilate your cervix and then they use a tool to take out the contents of what's inside.
Hmm.
And then there's like a suction tool to get it out. It's the exact same procedure as an abortion before
Hmm.
20 weeks. And
Hmm.
so that's where that line gets kind of dicey for people because a DNC is exactly the exact same thing as an abortion for a non late term pregnancy. If you're at a certain point, a miscarriage induce is very different. They would induce labor.
Hmm.
It would be in a facility. You would basically give birth to that child, and then that would be the intervention. But if you're before a certain amount of weeks, that DNC is your option, and you're able to do that. And there's a lot of people who don't want to do that because the idea of just sucking out, the contents that they feel very differently about it, and they might want to have a natural miscarriage, which would be the entirety of everything still intact.
Okay.
So,
And exiting your
um,
body in that
exactly.
way. Yeah.
So For me, I wanted things to be done and I wanted things to be safe and no infections because I
Yeah.
have 2 children that very much need me, and
Yes.
I also emotionally could not handle, like, waiting for that. Like, it was just too much for me.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think that would have been my choice too. But the point of this, it should be your choice, the mum's
Yeah,
choice,
yeah,
the woman who is carrying the pregnancy's choice, and it shouldn't be decided by you know middle-aged guys who obviously have never been pregnant. Can I just ask you? I know that you're really big on therapy, and
yeah.
it's something that I need to get more into. I can really see the benefits in it. Have you had therapy around this issue? And if so, how has that helped you?
Yeah, I've gone through talk therapy, off and on. I'm currently seeing a therapist that's actually the same therapist as my husband.
Oh, that's
Um,
good. But
it's
I like
actually
that.
very
Yes,
helpful,
yes. I found
because
a nice one where I think we will both see her and, my kids can see her, so it's the whole family thing, which I like.
it's nice because we don't cross boundaries because of, HIPAA laws and things like that, but,
Sure.
like, she has context for certain things we talk about,
Yes, that's what I
and
like.
I like that about it. So,
I do.
I also before that used, like, BetterHelp, as, like, an online platform. It didn't work for me, the availability of the therapist kind of didn't work for my schedule as a mom,
Mhm.
but for a lot of people, that works because they have a lot of therapists that work jobs 9 to 5 during the day, and then they have evening availability.
Yeah.
And for me as a mom, like, that doesn't work for me because I'm trying to turn off during
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
evening,
I hear you. Yeah.
and I wanna do something during nap time, but, that's a great option for a lot of people, and, yeah, I've done talk therapy. I'm also, after, handling some postpartum depression, I utilize antidepressants.
Mm. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
use a drug called Lexapro, and I think that that helped me navigate some of this. I think if I hadn't had, like, an ongoing kind of serotonin help, this could have been a lot more emotionally difficult.
Well
Um,
well, listen, I would love for us on a different episode to dedicate that to postpartum
yeah,
depression. I really
yeah,
would. And depression and anxiety in general when it comes to motherhood and everything that we're challenging and juggling as well. So, let's
yeah,
definitely explore that in more detail. And
for sure.
listen, to you guys at home, if there's any of you that for this subject, it's very real and you need some support, we're gonna put, links to resources, in the comments and in the bio. And so yeah, please just check us out because we'll have you covered and we'll point you
Yeah.
in the direction of some support.
Yeah, and then one last thing is just, something that, I've heard is when things that are bad are happening to look for the helpers. And, if you've had a situation where maybe this has happened to you, let us know, like, what happened, what were some stories that you can share with us of people that really helped, people that made
Yeah.
an impact that you remember fondly from that time, and what did they do to help alleviate some of that emotional and actually, like, logistically, the help that you might have needed at that time.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Momversation Club.
And if you've enjoyed today's show, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach even more moms and build a stronger village.
And remember, we're here for you. And together, I promise, we'll figure out where the F that village is at.
See you next time.
Bye.